Let's back it up a bit. Yes, I'm sure you saw the title. Rather than titling this video as Can I Beat Elden Ring as Vivi, I just wanted to give you guys immediately the answer. And to those who wanted to sit around and just kind of stick with this video, allow me to explain to you my little journey. I'm not a professional challenge kind of guy. I mean, to be fair, it took me 2 years to beat Demi-Fiend, and I'm still recovering from that. But I decided to set out on a personal sort of challenge, based around one of my most favorite characters from Final Fantasy IX, Vivi. Yes, the arguably, in my personal opinion, best character of Final Fantasy IX, and to be fair, Final Fantasy IX is filled with a bunch of good characters. But I figured we could have ourselves a little bit of fun with this boy. So, here's how my challenge was laid out. I decided to impose a few restrictions. One, I could only use certain spells that met the criteria of what Vivi could learn. Ergo, Fire, Fira, Firaga, and so on and so forth with the other spells. The next part was trying to figure out which spells would work with, the ones available in-game. And I think I came up with a really good comprehensive list. Without further ado, I present to you all the Vivi run. Unfortunately, Vivi's in a new world and he might be just a little bit scared. So first things first, we're gonna go get him some good clothes, a staff, and his first spell. I figured we should keep this as close as we can for Vivi with his limitations, so we will try to make him look as close as we can to his black mage look, as well as having certain restrictions, so no crazily heavy armor is going to be allowed for this. We gotta try to make him look as good as he possibly can. He'll have a staff in one hand and a seal in the other. Also, before you all ask, I know there's a staff in the DLC that would be perfect for Vivi, allowing him to cast all forms of magic. However, I decided it would be better to earn that ability in the future. Which makes me realize I'm probably gonna have to do a video where I see if Vivi can beat the DLC. Shit. So after being compelled to jump off a cliff for safety, Vivi wakes up in a dark area, not realizing that a pretty lady and a horse happened to be nearby and said very nice things about him. Now my main goal at this point is to make sure Vivi can actually fight and protect himself. So our first goal is to get to the round table hold where he'll be able to pick up his first spell, Flame Sling. Knowing how innocent our poor Vivi is, Melina takes a little bit of pity and redirects him to the round table hold where he will be safe for the time being and he can prepare for the terrible world that is the lands between. So after farming for a few runes, we finally gain the first damaging spell that'll probably be his primary form of damage, at least for the time being. Armed with his fire spell, I take Vivi out to go get his next spell, which might play a very important role later on, Poison. Because yes, even Vivi can learn the magnificent black magic spell that is Poison, which is actually a pretty beneficial skill to have early on. Well, time for the obligatory fetch quest montage. After completing a portion of my fetch quest, I decided it would be a good time for me to go ahead and pick up his Thunder spell next, which is held by this one random knight out here. It was rough, putting it lightly, but after some fiery persuasion, we managed to get him to give up his little cult book, which will teach us Honed Bolt. Ergo, Thunder! Before we begin doing some serious grinding, we gotta make sure we get the rest of Vivi's outfit. So we head out to the merchant that's right outside Raya Lucaria and buy the last pieces of our outfit, which we will probably be wearing till the end of the run. It was at this point I decided to test our luck. So I make my way over to Stormvale and prepare to fight our first boss, Margit.
Foul tarnished. In search of the Elden Ring. Emboldened by the flame of ambition.
It didn't go well. It was at this point I decided to go ahead and grab a couple more items, ergo the additional flask for mixing tiers, and one particular tier which might be beneficial later down the line, the Flame Shrouding Crack tier. Unfortunately, it was being guarded by a rotted tree avatar, which thankfully is severely weak to fire, so we were able to handle it quite effectively. Now properly armed, we take on Margit for realsies. The Flame Shrouding Crack tier at this point gives us a really healthy boost, which, along with we have the time to charge our Flame Sling, it'll actually deal a pretty decent amount of damage. Combining that with our ability to inflict poison, and we slowly whittle Margit down until finally, we bring an end to the Fell Omen. It was after defeating Margit I realized that there was technically one other spell I should probably get my hands on, Thundara. So, I head over to the Weeping Peninsula, jump down a couple of precarious little ledges, and make my way to the Golden Scarab holding the spell. Admittedly, this particular spell is fantastic against large bodies, but it can also take care of multiple targets. So, it's gonna be very beneficial, especially considering lightning is actually a pretty reliable source of damage, especially in the early game. Unrelated, I realize I need to get a staff that I can reliably have Vivi use spells from, so I head over to the Demi-Human Ruins where there is a Demi-Human Queen, and kindly ask her to give me her staff. Rather than tackling Stormvale Castle, I decided to head back over to Raya Lucaria. While the area itself is not crazy difficult, I felt confident. That was a mistake. Feeling I needed to have a little bit of a change of scenery, I decided to make my way over to Caria Manor, where unfortunately there's those finger-crawly little finger creepers, and I decided to run past literally everything just to get to the boss. Where I committed a very cardinal sin. I cheesed it. Yeah, there's a pretty infamous exploit people can use if they don't want to deal with the actual fight of Loretta, where they go into this corner, quit out the game, and then reload it. It reloads you into the boss arena. However, her AI hasn't activated, so while the boss is there, it will not react to anything that you do, so you can basically take your time whittling Loretta's HP down until there's really nothing left. I would be a fool to not be at least honest with you people that this is probably the only boss in this entire run that I actively cheesed. Feel free to hit dislike. Using the runes that I did not earn to level up a little bit, I end day one. Day 2 begins and I realize that I haven't really given a talisman to Vivi. So, as a little bit of a detour, we head out to Siofor River, where there is a talisman that might come in handy. I'm not gonna lie, I think I only used it for like maybe the very brief moment of the journey, then I just stopped using it. The Marika's Scar Seal. This seal is hidden behind a waterfall that's kind of being guarded by a dragonkin soldier, which thankfully you can easily maneuver behind before it wakes up. The Scar Seal itself actually raises your mind, intelligence, faith, and arcane by roughly, I believe, 3 points, but you take increased damage. Out of curiosity, I attempt to use it, and then I fight the Dragonkin soldier. After falling flat, I decided to head out to another minor Erd tree to take care of another Erd tree avatar, not only to get runes, but also to get access to the other crystal tiers that they offer. No reason in particular, just extra tiers and runes. I decided to take Vivi back to the Round Table Hold because there's somebody I wanted to introduce him to. Vivi's been dealing with a large amount of stress out in the world of Elden Ring, so I figured we should introduce him to the deathbed companion Fia, where he gets a most well-deserved hug. Finally, after so long after defeating Margit, we actually return to Stormveil Castle to attempt to storm it. With varying degrees of success after a very rude welcome. Thankfully for Vivi, security is pretty lax, so he was able to make his way up to the boss fog, thus introducing us to our next challenge. Alright, Godric time.
Mighty dragon, thou the true-born heir. Lend me thy strength, O kindred. Deliver me unto greater heights. Well. A lowly tarnished, playing as a lord. I command thee, kneel! I am the lord of all that is golden.
The good news is that with our repertoire of spells, Godric is actually not too big of a challenge. Most of his attacks are pretty well telegraphed. They're kind of easy to dodge as long as you don't get too greedy. Thankfully, since Vivi fights at a distance, we're able to relatively handle a majority of his attacks. However, that is at least until we get to his second phase.
What was that?
That boy be yelling.
Is that your cat?
Oh, no. No, that was definitely Godric.
Oh.
Truest of dragons.
Okay.
Lend me thy strength.
I heard the cat for a minute.
Now you do realize I have to keep that in the episode once I get editing it right.
Right.
It was at this point in the game when my friend mistook Godric's cries of agony for a cat. Mistaken cat noises aside, most of Godric's moveset tends to stick to the same. At least a few of his attacks from Phase 1 will now have a fiery aura effect, and he'll always start the match by using the new dragon head to breathe fire down your neck. Thankfully, you can just run up to him immediately to easily get away from the flames that'll be spewing your way. Well, that is good if you're a melee build at least. I personally use this opportunity to run up close to spack him with a couple of honed bolts, back away because I ran out of mana, and then continue the fight from there. Funnily enough, the fiery tornado that Godric spews up usually is meant to deflect projectiles. Thankfully, Lightning Strike does kind of go through it, so hey, bonuses at least. But yeah, for the majority of this fight, it's very telegraphed, most of his attacks are easy to dodge, and once you're done, well, congratulations, we just got our first Great Rune. It's at this point I decide maybe it would be a good idea for me to go grab the smithing stone bell bearing from this one cave. Problem is, I forgot who my opponent was. A Crystallian. The Crystallians are interesting enemy types. Most of the damage that you do to them is exceptionally minuscule. Usually the best way to actually deal the most damage to them is by hitting them with usually weapons that are strike type. Or the intended way, which is breaking their posture. The moment that you break their posture, their hyper armor just ceases to exist, and then they start taking increased bits of damage. As a spellcaster, this is a lot harder than it sounds. Thankfully, all I needed was just a little bit of extra perseverance, and then finally, I broke his posture, and you can watch right on screen how fast his health just ceases to exist. I finally head back to Ranni's Rise, where I introduce Vivi to another fellow big-hatted individual, Ronnie the Witch. He's not entirely sure what her entire plan is, but as long as he makes himself a new friend, that's all that matters. That, and there's a certain somebody that works for Ronnie that has 2 spells that are going to be needed for Vivi's repertoire: the Blizzard and the Blizzara spell, or Freezing Mist and Glintstone Ice Crag. Unfortunately, the Creeper wants Vivi to give a certain woman a very suspicious potion, but thankfully, Vivi realizes that this is probably a bad idea. So he takes it to somebody that's much more knowledgeable about this sort of thing, just to trick Celavis into finally gaining the spells that he needs. Unfortunately, Celavis is kinda cheap, as in, he sells things exceptionally expensive, and we just don't have the runes to buy what we need. After that, I finally head to the infamous area where you can get roughly 70 to 80,000 runes in a single go, back in Caelid, the Dying Dragon Grail. However, I'm not cheesing it. We are fighting honorably, so I fight Grail the intended way. I'd like to say also, for the record, if you guys want to cheese the boss, there's literally nothing wrong with that. Play the game with the tools that the game gives you, with whatever methods that the game gives you. Unfortunately, how her interesting, if you can really call it a boss fight, actually works is you have to take your time to whittle down and kill the other wyverns that are around her body. Doing so takes out large chunks of her HP, and after about 4 or 5 wyverns go down, you finally defeat Grail. And you cash out on one hell of a rune reward that we will spend most wisely. With our new bounty of runes, we pump up our intelligence and then finally buy Glintstone Ice Crag, thus putting an end to day 2. Day 3 begins, and it goes about as well as you'd expect. So I decided to take a little bit of a detour. I decided at this point it would be a good idea for Vivi to get a true sorcery and magical teacher, so I introduced him to Turtle Pope. Returning to Caelid, I figured it'd be a good idea to get more runes, so I take Vivi over to the heart of Aeonia to fight Commander Neil. It didn't go well. I'll be honest, I don't know how I died there. Crowd Control is the name of the game, and Commander Neil loves crowds. During the opening part of his fight, he'll summon a few guards that each have crossbows for distance fighting. Thankfully, using Thundar will have a chance of striking multiple enemies, allowing us opportunities to also hit the boss in the process. I can't recall the exact number, but at roughly 50% health, Neil is supposed to summon 2 stronger bodyguards that are mostly melee focused. I don't know if we broke his AI, but I'll take advantage of it. So by alternating between Blizzara to inflict Frostbite and Fire to reset it, we successfully whittle down Neil. Returning to Grael's burrow, I grab the Dectus medallion, potentially for later. I also remembered to grab the Haligtree medallion from good old Albus. At this point I decided to get just a few more runes, so I climb my way up to the ruin-strewn precipice, and make my way to Magma Worm Makar. Or that's what I would like to say, as I make a detour back to the Round Table Hold, and suddenly a certain edgelord rears his ugly head to impede Vivi's journey. He's a bit of an asshole and doesn't like black mages, but Vivi isn't scared, so he does his best to protect himself from this horrible fiend. Getting back on track, we return and make our way back to the Magma Worm Makar, which, he's interesting. Actually, all the Magma Worms are interesting. Being the final stage of someone taking part in Dragon Communion is either the greatest thing or the worst thing, depending on whether you want to be a land-crawling, mindless dragon or not. Either way, defeating Makar has granted us a different entrance to the Altus Plateau, as opposed to usually the intended reason. Now, the purpose for me coming here at this point is I remembered a specific talisman that, once we get it, we'll be using it up until the end of this run. The Godfrey Icon. This talisman increases the power of spells and skills that require charging, which, thankfully and not so thankfully, a few of our spells will actually be benefited. Also, can someone, like, explain Godefroy's existence? He's a weird one. Planning ahead, I go to the Altus Tunnel to retrieve a somber smithing stone bell bearing. This will be important later. However, it's guarded by 2 crystallians this time. Thankfully, Vivi is much stronger than before and is able to relatively handle himself. I do find it fascinating that the crystallians can be poisoned, kind of implying one of 2 things. 1, they're fleshy beneath the crystal, which makes their death animation just freaky as fuck. Or 2, perhaps the poison and scarlet rot in this game world just transcend the common understandings of poison. That or the game is being weird. Anyway, returning to Altus, I grab the Golden Order seal within this minor Erd Tree church. We will continue to use this particular seal for the rest of the run, as it will scale with our intelligence and faith. Now that Vivi is significantly stronger, I decided it's high time for him to conquer the Tree Sentinel all the way back at the beginning of the game. Which might sound a bit dangerous, as he possesses an anti-magic shield that just bounces our attacks back at us with a divine fury. And you'd be right. But not right now. Because we are Vivi. Heading to Celia Tunnel, we pick up the smithing stone bell bearing too, unlocking more upgrade materials for our staff. Going further into the cave, we come across an Onyx Lord and, we died. After leaving the cave, we return to Caelid, where we take the needle we got from Neil and give it to this weird old man who says he'll fix it. And thus ends day 3. So a day passes, and Vivi returns to Old Man Gowry, who gives him the repaired needle, telling him that a young woman is needing it. Thinking someone is in deep trouble, Vivi rushes to the Church of Rot and discovers Millicent. Unsure what to do with the needle, he hands it to her, who then proceeds to stab herself with it and just takes a nap. Thinking it's a bit weird, and after making sure that she was okay, Vivi then decided to take a rest just to gather his own thoughts about the situation. Suddenly, Millicent is standing and thanking him for his help. How nice. Vivi, overjoyed, returns to the shack where Gowry is, only to realize Millicent beat him to the punch. After talking and making sure that she was okay, Vivi continued on his journey, which I immediately derail by attempting to fight the Black Blade Kindred. You can see how that turned out. Changing course, Vivi wants to help Millicent out, so he heads to the Shaded Castle. He heard some sort of rumor about an arm being kept hidden away, so he figured that Millicent could use it. After finding it, he returns to Millicent and gives it to her. Thanking him for such a gift, she sends him on his way. At this point, I decided to take him to a creepy village filled with women that skin men worshipping some pale mother effer with a sickle stickle and edgy flames. But rather than being scared, Vivi has built up his confidence and beats the godskin in a single try. At this point, I decide maybe I'm a little bit stronger, so I make another attempt at the Red Wolf of Radagon and... So, in an attempt to get more runes, just to get more levels, I send Vivi to Caelid, where he'll take on Exyx, the decayed dragon of Caelid. And we beat him first try. The dragons are fascinating in this game. With Souls games, I have this expectation that all dragons are just weak to lightning. However, for this particular fight, I found it marginally easier to just use the blizzard spells to inflict frostbite, and then lob a fireball at them to deal a tremendous amount of damage. Honestly, this challenge so far has been a lot of fun, and I didn't really find many moments of stress throughout it. Well, aside from one fight in the future. Right, XX. So the big thing to worry about is his Rot Breath, specifically the one where he aims downward at the ground. Not at you, downward. This attack creates this really, really large AoE that does a ridiculous amount of damage on top of the rot buildup, but honestly, by the time that you get rotted, you'll already be dead because the damage is just that high. Just hop on Torrent and then run the frick away from that. Vivi's had a pretty good day overall, so we decided to take a break back at the round table, get a hug from Fia, and do her a nice little favor of returning this weird gold dagger to its owner, which... Oh, dear. Day 5 begins with a somber note, as Vivi is still recovering from the events of yesterday. So he attempts once more at the Red Wolf of Radagon. I'll admit, what makes this boss difficult for this challenge is the way that he moves. At this point, we're going to be facing bosses that are programmed to have certain responses to our actions, our spells, and the like. The wolf is exceptionally mobile and will even launch his own spells at us, which can make this fight hard or easy depending on your timing with your actions. For this fight, I decided to focus heavily on using Thundara, Lightning Strike. Thankfully, because of the wolf's size and mobility, there's a chance you can hit him with more than one attack. Or, I guess, bolt in this case. This is what we're hoping happens. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention. This wolf has a resistance toward our blizzard spells. So, basically magic damage. And thankfully, we defeat him. And we are rewarded with another spell slot. Oh, right, completely forgot to mention. I also picked up the Radagon icon. This will increase our casting speed. On top of that, we get a really rare drop, the Academy Glintstone Staff. We can't use it right now, but once we get the proper intelligence stat, this is going to be our endgame staff for the rest of the game. I attempt to move forward, but we are met with Moongrum, who thoroughly manhandles us. But we beat him on our third attempt. No issues. With no more obstacles in our way, we step past the big doors and encounter our next major boss.
Hush, little Calva. I'll soon birth thee anew, a sweeting, fresh and pure.
Getting flashbacks to whenever he saw the Black Mage factory, Vivi's unsure how to react, but he knows he has to fight. So the gimmick with this boss, for those unsure, you have to smack the glowing, creepy children to break Renali's barrier. This first phase is actually pretty easy. The real problem comes with the second phase. It's at this point Vivi has finally met his match. A fellow mage. But she's using spells he's unfamiliar with, such as a Kamehameha laser, crystal bullets, and she calls in outside help. Things we can't do. I'll admit, this was one of the hardest fights for me in this challenge. Attempting to find the right timings for my attacks made this a headache, and after a few deaths, I just leave, deciding to come back later. Those spells must have caused a concussion because I decided to go from what could be considered a puppy to a full-grown lion by attempting to beat Radon.
Before we begin, allow me to paint you the full picture. General Radon is cursed ever to wander. Eaten from the inside by Melania's scarlet rot, his wits are long gone. Now he gathers the corpses of former friends and foes alike, gorging on them like a dog.
yeah, that death was deserved. In what can only be described as falling downstairs, I fight Grail and Caelid. And die. Then I attempt the Black Blade Kindred again. And die. Hey, let's try Radahn again. Screw it, I fight a Tibia Mariner and then I kill another demi-human queen to get a new spell slot. Today wasn't a good day for Vivi. I stand corrected. There technically is one positive thing. I head to Volcano Manor where we finally get some level of success and make a new friend for Vivi, Raya. And that ends day 5. After getting access to Volcano Manor, I decide to survey the outside perimeter in search of a particular crystal tier, a one in hindsight I will rarely use. The Cerulean Hidden Tier, which is guarded by the ulcerated tree spirit. Funnily, I get him stuck a few times on this little fireplace, which, if you cast Freezing Mist, it will trigger Frostbite multiple times, making this fight substantially easier. Afterwards, though, I make a concentrated effort in trying to defeat General Radahn. It's funny with the history of this character. In the initial release of the game, he was deemed too hard and had to be nerfed, but he still packs a hell of a punch. It's a godsend that you're allowed to fight on Torrent for this battle, because between his huge swings and gravity-based magic attacks, Radahn's a foe not to be trifled with. Even more so that I'm fighting him solo and on a challenge run, not fighting him the we intended way. Which, you know, is to summon all the additional fighters like Alexander, Blythe, and Jiren. I mean, this goes from a battle festival into a battle of attrition, slowly whittling him down until he leaps high into the sky and embraces his inner meteorite in an attempt to destroy you. For those curious, yeah, it's a one-shot in most scenarios. Unless you're probably built to tank this attack, you're gonna die. But that's what I love about this fight. The lore around it. Sure, I can participate to the fullest, but I still hold this battle in high regards because of the theming. And thankfully, the best run occurs. Utilizing Vivi's poison and Blizzara fire combo, we slowly but surely end the tired general, sending him off to a hopefully undisturbed rest that definitely will not be interrupted in any way. No siree. Before heading off to where that meteorite, I return to Caelid and search the outskirts of Gerank's temple. By following carefully down these routes and platforms, I come across the Dragon Crest Shield Talisman, just to boost Vivi's natural defenses. He might need it. Afterwards, I decide to make Vivi inspect the giant hole in the ground, taking him down there to bear witness to Nokron, the Eternal City. Making his way past the silver tiers, he comes across a mysterious room with only a single tier in the center. Unsure of what to do, he inspects it, and to his horror it forms a black mage, made to look exactly like him.
I found you, Faker.
Faker? I think you're the fake hedgehog around here. You're comparing yourself to me? Huh? You're not even good enough to be
I'll
my
make you
fake.
eat those words.
Vivi versus Faker Vivi. This fake knows all of Vivi's techniques, but a Faker is doomed to fail against the original, and Vivi conquers it, now more sure of himself than ever that he must finish this journey. As for my next move, since we got ourselves our second Great Rune, I make my way to the capital on the Altus Plateau, though the entrance is being guarded by a draconic tree sentinel, which, upon writing this, I realized I lied earlier. This is the only other boss I cheese. I'm legit surprised they haven't patched this. By utilizing poison and frostbite, we slowly whittle down the draconic tree sentinel, thus allowing us entry into the capital. Upon entering said capital, we're reunited with Melina, who tells us what she intends to do. Afterwards, we continue to explore every nook and cranny, coming across the Phantom Godfrey, and we have a problem. This spirit is immune to status effects, so Frostbite is a no-go. However, his moves are easy in a way to prepare and dodge, making this more a test of patience in attempting to find the right moments to strike. After defeating Godfrey, we get our last talisman slot and make our way to a true test of skill. Morgoth.
Graceless, tarnished. What is thy business with these thrones? Godric the Golden. The twin prodigies, Mikola and Melania. General Radahn. Praetor Rykard. Luna Princess Rani. Willful traitors, all. Thy kind are all of a piece. Pillagers, emboldened by the flame of ambition. Have it writ upon thy meager grave. Felled by King Morgoth, last of all kings.
While we do die during our first attempt, we aren't willing to give up, so we go in with a fresh mind and give him another try. Morgoth, while jokingly loses in a lot of boss versus boss fights, is a spectacle. The way he calls forth holy blades from the sky, to the moment he coughs up blood and explodes in a vibrant wave of light and power. I love this boss visually. It's like a dance, timing the spells I launch and focusing intently on his movements. He's the last true hurdle, guarding us from Fira, Firaga, and Blizzaga, and by extension Thundaga in the areas beyond. But our patience pays off, and we defeat the Bell-Omen King Morgoth. Vivi believes his journey is over, but no, it's only halfway. Realizing his path is barred by thorns, he sits at the grace to talk to Melina once more. She gives him a medallion that will take him to where he needs to go, but right now, the boy is tired. So he takes but a moment to rest, and ends day 6. After taking the rolled medallion to the Grand Lift, we successfully make our way to the mountaintop of the Giants, where a bunch of our late-game tools will be found. First things first, we go to the Zamor ruins, where we pick up both the Smithing Stone Bell-Bearing 3 and Zamor Ice Storm, which will be a Tier 3 ice spell, Blizzaga. This spell conjures up a big ice storm that surrounds the player. Sure, it takes time to cast, but it can hit multiple opponents multiple times, and that's usually the best time for us to even cast. As we go further and further into the mountains, Vivi reunites with his good friend Millicent, who tells him of her travels. Crossing the frozen lake and ignoring the Aurora Borealis dragon, we reach another Church America where we get another somber Smithing Stone bell bearing, as well as a sacred tear to boost our flasks. Finally, we reach the Guardian's Garrison, which has the spell book we need to acquire our last fire spells, Fira and Firaga. It's guarded by a few NPC units that, let's be fair, don't pose much of a challenge at this point. Ignoring the dude with the face for a shield, we grab the spellbook and get the heck out of there. With our new fire spells in hand, we return to Raya Lucaria for a few reasons. The last few spell slots are locked behind a gimmick where you need a certain emote. So, we search out and find a second glintstone sorcery key, pick up the Lusat's glintstone staff, and rather than deliver the key, I once more fight Renala. Thankfully, the extra knockback from Firaga helps stagger her very easily, and finally, we topple her through brute force fire magic.
Little Rani, my dear daughter, weave thy night into being.
Return to Baldy McNosehair, we give him the key and get the emote, which we use immediately at the converted tower, causing the ladder to appear, and we finally get another spell slot. To really show the power of Firaga, I decided to do something I've been holding off on. The Gold Scarab Talisman, which will act as our de facto EXP up ability. The boss barely lasted 20 seconds. At this point, I decide to finally make a little bit more progress. So we return to the mountaintop of the fire giants, and we take on the last fire giant. This was a trial trying to figure out how to handle this beast. Matching his size, he has a lot of HP and 2 phases. He's very resistant toward frostbite and fire, meaning this fight is going to be a long one. His movements are slow, but his attacks are extremely powerful, so we gotta be extremely careful. Surprisingly, during our first attempt, we actually get him to phase 2. And then proceed to die. But I know this fight is possible. We just have to be careful and make sure each spell cast counts. I decided to get just a few more runes. Maybe a little extra power will help, and decide to take on the Ice Dragon Borealis. As it should be obvious, Firaga makes short work of him. And that puts a cap on day 7. Day 8 begins with a bang, and I'm feeling feisty. So we head to Castle Sol in preparation to take on Captain Nile. This dude is the frostbite and lightning version of the rotted Captain O'Neill, which makes him the bane of certain builds. He summons 2 banished knights, arguably the worst opponents to duke it out with as a mage, so we carefully and slowly pick them off before we fight the main opponent. This fight is another test of patience and memorization. Nile's attacks are crazy and punishing, but they are dodgeable. With the right rolls and spacing, you can take little pot shots with the Blizzara spell, and if you're lucky, you can even lob an extra fire spell. To give you an idea of how this boss fight played out, I'll just play a few minutes so you can see my dodge times, attack intervals, and that'll let you know just how tedious this fight really was. After defeating Nile, we get the other half of the Halig Tree Medallion, unlocking another section of the mountaintops, or rather just a snowy wasteland. This place has a particular cave, that has a particular boss, that gives us a particular spell. After beating around the bush, we come across Estelle. This boss has a grab that, for the most part, could be similar to Radahn's Meteor, in that it is most certainly a one-shot. I gotta say, since I'm pretty sure everyone and their mother has pointed this part out, this dude looks like he belongs in frickin' Bloodborne. His gravity-based attacks are ludicrously strong, and one of said attacks reflects the reward we want to get from him, Meteorite of Estelle, or in Vivi's case, the ultimate black magic spell, Meteor. Now, unfortunately, this spell isn't as great as it appears in Final Fantasy IX. The meteors themselves do have a higher chance to hit opponents than its weaker variant, but overall it isn't as good or reliable due to the high intelligence requirement and the huge mana cost. Now, here's a game changer. I remembered at this point that in Final Fantasy IX there's a mechanic called trance, a form in which your characters gain enhanced powers and abilities, so I thought, does Elden Ring have anything like that? Why, yes it does. Equipping Godrick's Great Rune and using a Rune Arc will increase all of Vivi's stats by 5, making this a bit of a game changer. So with renewed vigor and a strategy in mind, I head into the battlefield and take on the last giant, utilizing the power of trance, poison, and our timing with spells we slowly but sure... Damn it. Okay, as I forgot to activate trance in my next attempt, I was somehow able to defeat the last fire giant, which means my entire speech was practically useless. Great. Vivi makes his way to the forge where Melina appears. Seeing the innocence of his spirit, Melina can't bring herself to tell him what she's about to do, so she casts sleep on Vivi and lights herself on fire, just so that Vivi can be brought forth to his destiny, supporting him in her own way so that he may become Elden Lord and usher in the Age of Peace.
Shall burn. Burn for the sake of the new Lord. For guiding me here. The one who walks alongside flame shall one day meet the road of destined death.
Vivi, unsure about what happened, awakens in an unfamiliar place, Fira Mazula. Continuing on his journey, he comes across the last spellbook he needs to unlock what will be the best technique in his arsenal, Thundaga. This is the spell we are working toward the most. It takes a while to charge, but the moment he unleashes it, you better pray you're not in the vicinity, as this beast of a spell will practically decimate health bars. But we aren't done making Vivi more powerful, no. Returning to the other snowfield, we come across a portal that will take us to a blood-soaked land. However, it is guarded by an invader that... Honestly, I don't even know how I pulled that off. Anyway, going through the portal unlocks Mogwin Palace, and that will be the best grinding spot for runes and such going forward. But we don't need to explore this place, at least not in this video. Returning to Fira, we move forward on the beaten path until we come across a very infuriating boss fight. FromSoft has been trying to recreate the Ornstein and Smough fight for years, but just weren't able to figure out the best way to do it. The Godskin duo is the culmination of the small mistakes that they have made over the years. Rather than complement and respond to each other's moves, you have to battle against two AIs that don't necessarily work together. And let's not even get started on their combined health bar. My frustration reaching its peak, I decided to take a break, and unfortunately that ends day 8. Day 9 begins and Vivi finally defeats the Black Blade Kindred. It's time to clean up some final encounters as we near the end of his journey. I found it pretty funny that all I had to do was lob some Firagas from the sky to thoroughly defeat this particular enemy. And the same thing went down with Grail. Now that Vivi has the power of Thundaga, he's pretty much dismantling most of his opponents. Large enemies just can't handle the power when they're struck multiple times. Okay, some large enemies can handle it. Another failed duo boss comes up with the champion Gargoyles, which, thanks to them standing in water, they take bonus damage from Thundaga. I'll admit, I've pretty much run out of fascinating things or interesting things to say with some of these bosses. I mean, with Thundaga, most of them just can't handle Vivi's power. Getting access to the deep root depths, and after clearing up some ant infestation, I gain a few more runes and decide to go ahead and return to Fira to attempt one more time to defeat the twin Godskins. And, dear God, I don't know if it's because I had a good night's sleep, but we actually defeat them utilizing Thundaga and Blizzara. Like, I need you to understand, I was shocked I won. I'll just play the whole boss fight here so you can kind of see how it went. you. After clearing this obstacle, we move forward and come across another draconic tree sentinel that this time we don't cheese and we fight it legit. Lazara and Firaga once again becoming our best friends for this encounter, and we beat him soundly on our first try. Now, we come to a fight that I admit I have never beat solo. In almost all of my playthroughs, I always end up using spirit summons to help fight this particular boss. But this time, I have to plant my feet, grit my teeth, and fight one of, if not one of, the hardest boss fights in the game, possessing the power of destined death, Malekith. And like that, my spirit is broken. Destined Death's health drain is so ridiculously punishing. All that bravado I showed, all that confidence, it just broke down as I realized the terror of the beast I was fighting. And in that moment, I gave up. I well and truly gave up, thinking I wouldn't be able to finish the challenge. But then, day 10 began. Hell no. We aren't giving up. People have done level 1 runs, for God's sake. There's no way in hell I'm ending the run when we've come so far. My strategy changes on day 10, this time utilizing the power of frostbite and poison to whittle down this first phase, making it a cakewalk. Phase 2 comes around with a vengeance, and I utilize the pillars to my advantage to properly prepare full power Thundagas. During the times Malekith is slowly walking, there's a chance he will be struck by our lightning bolts that we call from the sky. It's not consistent, but by God it's effective when the lightning strikes. Sure, we have to plan perfectly and prepare the exact moment of time needed to cast these bolts, but by good God we succeed. We succeed, and with one last full power Thundaga, we bring an end to the demon of destined death, Malekith.
The rune of death is unbound. And the lands between are shrouded by death's dark fate. But the flames will also burn the impenetrable thorns. Farewell it is then. You'll be Elden Lord yet.
I remember my damn knees were shaking at this point. And now it's here. The final trials. Vivi is scared, but he's ready. Everything he has experienced was leading up to this last moment, these last few battles. So clutching his staff close, he steps to face off against the first foe who stands in his way. Is what I would say if Gideon wasn't a joke.
I knew you'd come to stand before the Elden Ring, to become Elden Lord. What a sad state of affairs. I commend your spirit, but alas, none shall take the throne. Queen Marika has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle unto eternity. Become a lord. Not even you. A man cannot kill a god.
The first true foe standing in his way is the Elden Chad himself, Godfrey.
It's been a long while, Morgoth.
Long and hard didst thou fight, tarnished warrior, spurned by the grace of gold. Be assured the Elden Ring resteth close at hand. Alas, I am returned. To be granted audience once more. Upon my name as Godfrey, the first Elden Lord.
He possesses most of the same moves as his Phantom counterpart, but this time he comes in with new tools to his repertoire. Heavy ground slams that can catch you off guard, the ability to rend the earth itself, and when he lets out the roar, you better pray you get your jumps timed perfectly, because from this point onward, each step he takes will cause a tremor. But that's the least of your worries, as Phase 2 begins.
That will be all. Thou didst me good service, Sirach.
Guess what? It's Space Jam time and he's gonna slam if you get grabbed by his beefy bloody boy. Godfrey said, fuck the axe, these hands are rated E for everyone, and Vivi is getting quite acquainted with the floor as he gets perpetually buried with each slam. But this is a battle of tension. Watch his movements, jump when you need to, and by God, do not give up. We're so fucking close at this point, and with one last cast, we beat the ultimate WWE wrestler, Godfrey. Taking a deep breath, Vivi stares at the Ur tree and steps beyond the golden light. Radagon. This is the ultimate test of reaction time, but Vivi makes a horrifying discovery. Radagon can parry magic. This is where I get scared. How the hell do I fight a foe that parries the very thing I've been relying on this whole run? I try several times, several strategies, but nothing really seems to work. I'm at a loss until the run you see playing right now happens. We have to fight through the parries. Blizzara once again being our best friend for this fight, as well as Frostbite. A dodge here, a cast there, and by God, we finally take down the red-haired god. But no, we aren't done. Vivi can't usher in the era of peace until he brings down the thing that is upholding this current order of malignant chaos. The Elden Beast. Vivi can hear it. The call of Torrent, the one steady ally he's had this entire run. Calling forth his noble steed, he rushes in to face this beast of primordial light. Every cast matters here. He's beaten and battered from his battle with Radagon, but no, he will not fall. Not this moment, when he's come as far as he has. calling down Thundaga as many times as it takes, and dodging waves upon waves of ethereal light, Vivi unleashes his entire being into one last bolt cast, and finally, after his long and arduous journey, he brings down a god.
The fallen leaves tell a story of how a little mage became Elden Lord in our home across the fog, the lands between. Our seed will look back upon us and recall an age of peace.
I'd like to take this time to thank everyone for sticking through this video all the way to the end. This was my first time attempting a fully complete challenge run, and if you all liked it or not, be sure to let me know in the comments below. Honestly, I can see why people do these sorts of things. As time-consuming as it was, I actually had a lot of fun doing it, and if I ever do another in the future, I will be sure to use what I learned in this to make it easier on me when it comes to editing. I also want to extend a big thank you to Horizen Dreamer for making the thumbnail for this video. Please go check her out. You will not regret it. Another thanks goes to all of my server members who I gave little updates here and there about this project, and I want to thank everyone who is giving me support for this and keeping my spirits high as I continued working on it. This was a multi-month long project, and I gotta say, it was tough, but good lord, it was fun. And finally, I want to thank all of you, and not only for supporting me all these years, but for making something like this even remotely possible. Thank you. And with that, I'm gonna go lay down. Good night, good day everyone. See you all next time.